A very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise It is this morning. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Yusuf.
It's the 23rd day in the month of October 2024. I'm Makinde. Welcome to the show. And so where are we taking you this morning? We're taking you straight to Ibadan City. And that's what's right there in front of you, the sprawling city of Ibadan, the Oyo State capital. Well, it's still adjudged to be one of the largest cities in West Africa, actually, if not the largest in West Africa. And that building you're looking at there is the Makbo Hall, the historic Makbo Hall, colonial-style Ibadan City Hall, right on top of what is known as the Makbo Hill in Ibadan, Oyo State. And there is a signature food in Ibadan, particularly it is amala with what they call abula and what they call orishirishi, also known as assorted. So if you go to Ibadan and you need to take that signature food in order for you to know that you are in Ibadan. Otherwise, I don't know. But then you may want to choose where you eat, but hey, that's one of the things you have to take away from Ibadan. That experience is, and I can name a number of places, but I don't want to do adverts this morning. Uncle, why are you laughing?
I wish I were the one laughing.
Oh, really?
The person who's laughing knows himself.
Please do the advert, please, because those food you give me, this signature food to eat before you go to that hall.
But what you just did right there, Ayo, that was not kind at all.
Oh,
because right now I am hungry and I'm beginning to dream of amala, and I think I just might eat amala after the show. Really, I mean, amala is certainly something. I mean, I've seen people who say,
did they say that food, abula?
Abula, yes, that's begiri and ewedu together, you know, with a bit of tomato stew or soup, as you like to call it. You know, a little watery, not made too thick. That's how they like it. It's really, really nice and very light. You know,
please, if you have don't judge stomach, don't go near whoever you are.
Somebody certainly has eaten it. Different strokes for different folks.
No,
some of us have
actually.
You haven't eaten abula before?
It's just a name. I'm just trying to imagine, like,
wow,
with that name, the way it sounds mesmerizing. So you're just like, oh dear.
Exactly, he doesn't know what is missing. But, you know, it's the hall we are showing you this morning. It's not the food, you know. Let's not take away from the hall.
The food. I mean,
Makbo Hall is certainly something. It's certainly a sight to behold. It's one of those, you know, edifices that has stood the test of time. Only recently on Instagram, I was looking at a picture and somebody was showing a street of Ibadan in 1970 something, 1975 or so, and then showed the street, the same street, Ibadan to 2024, and they were wondering why hasn't the city changed? It didn't look like the city had changed, apart from the fact that the structures look a little older. And someone was saying, well, Ibadan is what Ibadan is. I mean, look at the city of the brown roofs. I think it was a poem written by, is it J.P. Clark? John Pepper Clark to Ibadan, like an ode to Ibadan and the city of the dusty brown. Huh?
You say Pepper?
John Pepper Clark. You don't know John Pepper Clark?
No, I mean, that's why that's
a renowned Nigerian poet.
Pepper, I don't know how you got that name, Pepper.
Well, we can ask the people of the South. Those were in the days when literary icons it didn't matter where they came from. They stayed in cities that were different. I mean, Chinua Achebe was in UI for many years. You know, Ibadan was the center of where, because, you know, you had the country's first university. So you had a lot of literary greats and even academic greats situated in UI. I can't remember the initial name it was then called before it was changed to the University of Ibadan. But certainly Ibadan comes as the city of many firsts. That's where broadcast in Nigeria began. That was where the first ever radio and TV station were established in this country. So Ibadan certainly has its pride of place. It has the famous cocoa house, that house that was built from proceeds of cocoa in the 1970s. Ayo, please help me out here before I misinform people. But I certainly know about Cocoa House, built in the Midwest, built in the time zone we still had the regions, and there was competition with regards to agricultural produce before oil came. And, you know, we are telling a totally different story. But you can admire the city of the dusty brown roofs. It hasn't changed much. Yes, certain landscapes, certain parts of it are changing gradually. But this is basically how it still looks. And I'm sure those, if you woke them up from the 70s and say, look at it in 2024, they'll be like, oh, I think that's Cocoa House over there. But they'll be like, oh, you mean it's still like this? Well, I think it should be a World Heritage Site. Yes, I think that they should file, the people of Ibadan should file for their city to be a World Heritage Site. That will be something. I think that would certainly make something. I do recall visiting Stone Town in Zanzibar, and it's a city that has been that way for many years. It hasn't changed much. The architecture is still the same. They preserved it basically in the same way that it has been. I mean, of course, there are other parts of the city that is developing, but Stone Town is a town not to be touched. So maybe, who knows, Ibadan can suddenly get on that map if as it was in the beginning, so it's now and never shall be.
Well, if only Mr. Pepe knows the implication of his name, Pepe. So for that city, it will be hugely interesting. I'm talking about the Pepe itself.
Oh, Pepe.
Not just Mr. Pepe.
Well, there's a drink called Pepe. I think.
You see?
Yeah, there's a drink called Mr. Pepe.
Yeah, but you know, even though they say you could see Mapo Hall from different points in the city, but you can't grasp the scale of it until you're actually standing on that hill, the floor, that hall where that place is. So they say it might hit differently if you do. But speaking about Cocoa House and region, incidentally, interestingly as well, part of what we're going to be highlighting today, former President Obasanjo, after the League of Northern Democrats met with him, he did say, regionalism appears to be the bane of the country. So those are some of the issues we will consider, even though many relish or reminisce about, or nostalgic as a matter of fact, about regions, what we did at the time. Or who would have thought the former president has a perspective, interesting one at that, on what many thought, well, might have been a very, very interesting thought and perspective. But not to worry, we will talk about that and more in a moment. You just have to stick with us. But in the meantime, the two issues. First, we'll take you through some of the dailies, and then we may also possibly look into what transpired in the National Assembly. But Ayo, take us through the dailies.
There are sundry issues in the papers this morning, but let's begin with issues around power supply and effects. Vanguard newspaper, unending grid collapses threaten survival of businesses. That's according to OPS. Call for full privatization of power sector. It hinders economic growth, according to NECA. Frustrating for manufacturers, according to MAN. Mere infrastructure upgrades insufficient. Full privatization needed, from Nasima. Reduces competitiveness of Nigerian businesses, that is from Asbon. Find the details of that story on page 5 of Vanguard newspaper this morning. A related story is on the front page of Daily Trust newspaper. Millers, barbers, tailors deplore massive blackout in the north. Power outage grounds business activities. Minister raises committee to investigate grid collapse. Declares state of emergency in electricity sector. The details of that story continue on the inside pages of the paper this morning. The Nigerian News Direct has LPG pricing. Minister orders NNPC Limited marketers to halt exports. Directs NMDPRA to develop domestic pricing framework. That story has details on page 13 of the paper this morning. If you look at the front page of the Guardian newspaper, FG seeks IMF's help as flooding, oil output crisis dampen outlook. Details of that story on page 6 of the paper today. The Daily Times newspaper, Nigeria has disappointed Africa. Black race, from Obasanjo, blames poor leadership, regionalism, disunity. Details on page 2 of the paper. Blueprint newspaper, ahead October 24 NEC. Chieftain drags PDP before court in fresh plots to remove Damagum. wants North Central to serve out Ayu's tenure. My reconciliation job concluded. That is from Oyinlola. The details continue on the inside pages of the paper this morning. Daily Independent, FG plans increase in oil production to ease FX inflow, stabilize Naira. Says Nigeria on track to meet 2 million barrels per day before end of 2024. Explains why banks can't lend at single-digit interest rate. The details you'll find on the inside pages. I hope it is convincing enough. The Leadership newspaper, governors divided over suit challenging EFCC's legality. Imo, Bauchi, Osun, Taraba joint case. Anambra, Adamawa, Ebonyi withdraw. Supreme Court reserves judgment. Details on page 4 of the paper this morning. Business Day newspaper, petrol use halves in validation of cross-border smuggling. Understand what that means? Well, get the details on the front page, and it continues on the inside pages of the paper this morning. Nigerian Tribune, PDP crisis deepens as party INEC dragged to court over NEC meeting. Plaintiff seeking injunction against Damagum Odefa. Put defendants on notice, judge rules. The Jones case till October 25. Wants court nod to hold NEC. We've resolved our differences. That is from Oyinlola. The details on page 3. This Nigerian newspaper has this one. Senate summons NDLEA over illicit drug claims against senator. Constitutes a 6-member ad hoc committee to investigate allegation of banned substances found in Ashiru's Kwara residence. What does all of these mean? What are its implications? The details on page 4 of the paper this morning. These are some of the papers we have for you today.
Well, yes, indeed, Ayo, quite a lot to mull through in the papers. You can see a lot of them focused on electricity and how that needs to be up and running. Take a look at the front page of the Vanguard this morning on ending grid collapses threaten survival of businesses. That's according to the organized private sector. And we understand that a state of emergency has been declared in that particular sector, in the sector of electricity. So if you take a look at Vanguard, Leadership, and Daily Trust this morning, their headlines are almost in sync. On ending grid collapses threaten survival of businesses, so says organized private sector. Leadership has this one, 40 transmission lines through northern states into darkness. So this seems to be focusing largely on the north. And then you also see there, millers, barbers, tailors deplore massive blackout in the north. It's certainly something to, worry about. Power outage grounds business activities. Ministers raise this committee to investigate grid collapse, declare state of emergency in electricity sector. So it's unclear whether somebody is actually calling for the declaration or, this is something that he has done. The story is on page 4 for you, but it's certainly something to be worried about. The frequent grid collapses. I think last week thinking about it, Chimling, I started to think to myself that maybe we shouldn't, while we're thinking to decentralize our national grid and see how it is that we can get electricity up and running in the different states or regions, as the case might be, because while there was a national grid collapse, we understand that Abia State, parts of Aba were insulated from the national grid collapse. So people have said, look, this national grid is certainly not sustainable, and we have to have mini grids in different parts of the country, especially in industrial areas. So while we're looking to get that up and running, there should also be, it should not now be about how many times you fall, but how quickly we're able to rectify, the fault on the national grid. I think that should be something that we measure nowadays. If the national grid goes down, how quickly are we able to rectify the fault and get the system running again? I think that's a challenge, because if we say that this is what we have for now, it's going to take a while to build the smaller mini grids. The question then should be, when we do have grid collapses, because it does appear to be something that we cannot avoid now, at least for now, how quickly can we get the system up and running? I mean, should it take an entire weekend? Should it take 24 hours? Should it take 18 hours? What exactly is the ministry working towards? I think for me now, that's the question that we should be asking. Now, that's not to say that we're giving a long leash for, or we should excuse grid collapses. But if we have seen over the years that they're inevitable, the question then should be, how quickly do we get the system up and running?
But I think, yeah, Professor Onaji's integrated power project, I think 188 megawatts. I just keep wondering, maybe I might have missed something, but he's got this, the only integrated power project we have in the country at the moment, because it bypasses the grid. So he generates and distributes all of those. He doesn't have to rely on that challenging transmission infrastructure that we have in the country. So I know he did say he was working on, I think, 1,000 or so, which he was going to hand over to the federal government. So we don't know what the authorities are doing about that one, because you can imagine if you do have that, that's massive. And then, again, the states. Well, another story for another time. But look at the front page of Daily Times. I think that hits differently, though. Former President Obasanjo, part of what we highlighted, which we still will, but just to keep it out there, he says, point blank, Nigeria has disappointed Africa. It disappointed the black race. The front page of Daily Times, that's where he was speaking about the regionalism, how he wants us to be united, as the front page of the paper did highlight. So, Daily Times, not Daily Trust, guys.
Daily Times,
yeah, he talked about the question of leadership. I know time and again we always say we need leaders. Our leadership recruitment process, the elections, you can't even talk about the elections confidently now, because you don't know what you're going to, you almost know that the elections won't go the way you think. You almost know.
Chairman, but we must always remember that that's the perspective of a man, of an old man. Yes, we have not lived up to the potential.
It's not just an old man.
I know, it's a former president, etc. But the point I'm trying to make is, you find that elderly people, the older they get, the more disappointed they feel in this country, the more they rue opportunities that we've missed. They are more in their reflective stages, and I think that young people shouldn't be made to bear the burden of that. We need to be able to let them see what is possible. Yes, we should understand that we've come a long way, and I have to thank Ayo. Ayo, thank you so much for that information. Talking about Ibadan and the Cocoa House, and he quickly put up the information. Cocoa House was completed in July 1964 and commissioned in July 1965 at a height of 105 meters. It was the first skyscraper in West Africa. So if anybody asks you, yes, we had the first skyscraper.
We had many firsts in Nigeria.
In West Africa, and it was situated in that dusty brown roof city you were seeing in Ibadan. And it was that way. It was the first skyscraper for many years, from 1965 to 1979. It wore that crown proudly for many years, and that house was built from the proceeds of cocoa. So they did it in their prime. They did it in their youth. So the youth should not be weighed down. Yes, we're giants with clay feet, etc., etc. But when you look at what young people are doing in spite of government, you know that there is still so much to be accomplished if our leadership, well, even if they don't get it right, young people are doing it.
So the glass is half full.
It is half full. It should be for young people, not half empty, the way elderly people like to say it.
Okay.
Ayo.
About young people, the front page of the Guardian newspaper is where my eyes are on this morning, and it's something right under one of the pictures. Right under the pictures there, one of the stories you find: lost billions. Front page of the Guardian newspaper, why government's youth empowerment efforts are failing. And well, I mean, it would seem like, okay, government is making several efforts, but then how far so far? Remember, the president announced that he's going to have a 1-month-long youth conference or youth engagement program and all of that. It's a report by Partnership for African Social and Governance Research. They highlighted that a critical breakdown in the system, like financial support and empowerment initiatives from the government, donor agencies and NGOs, they frequently fail to reach these aspiring young people. Frequently fail to reach these aspiring young people. What are the allegations? Interference and misappropriation of funds by government officials. The fact that you even fail to reach them means there is no communication. So essentially you're saying that the initiatives, the government, the youth empowerment initiatives, they are not for the young people. They are not for the youths. They are actually for these people. So these government officials and the people who are supposed to execute. So I hope that the presidency and the federal government and all the people who are involved in this fray will note that in this new move that the president is making, they find a way to guardrail this initiative so it doesn't go the way other initiatives have gone over the years. 1 month long, well, maybe I'm hearing that for the first time, but how that is going to be implemented, I guess we'll wait to see. And I'm sorry, Chimele, there is no way we are not going to talk about young people. We're not going to talk about the Nigerian governors, the states, because the youths live in the states. A good number of people in the north now cannot go about their businesses because electricity has collapsed. If only, and you remember, you mentioned the IPP in Abia State. We heard from Dr. Naji that it takes just about 3 years to execute an IPP. And I understand that there is some IPP initiatives in Lagos that's happening somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where, but it doesn't take long to build that kind of infrastructure, and then every state will have electricity. Really, what does it take? And then these young people will not have to go the way they are going all the time. So I hope that there is a lesson here for the federal government to ensure that this initiative that the president announced is not going to go the way everyone before has gone. So let's take a short break, and when we return, it's time to get to the nitty-gritty. Stay with us.
Twenty members of the league, led by its chairman and former governor of Kano State, Ibrahim Shekarau, are at former President Olusegun Obasanjo's home in Abeokuta, the Ogun State capital, to draw from his wealth of experience and to get his support for the league in the face of the current challenges and the need for solutions to the country's problems.
It is about our existence as a nation, as one people, regardless of our political leanings. We came together with a clear vision to mobilize and enlighten our citizens the need to join hands together, work together, and influence political developments regardless of the political parties.
The former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, is not pleased about happenings in the country and points at the fragmented nature of the country from independence as the cause of disunity which has hampered development, just as he advises the League of Northern Democrats to make it a national league instead of a regional group.
At the time of our independence, we are probably the only country, or definitely one of the few countries in Africa, that did not have one leader at independence. We had 3 leaders. So we attained independence almost with 3 countries in one. And that remained part of our problem for a long, long time. And it hasn't completely left us. So when you give the name of your league as Northern League of Democrats, my point would be, oh, how I wish it had been National League of Democrats.
The former president has a recipe for proper leadership, high moral values, high sense of patriotism, and responsibility in strategic areas of socio-economic and political spheres.
Nigeria is greater than any of us. Nigeria. And we should see Nigeria in the holistic form that we see. This country can play a very, very significant role in the world affairs. We have tried something near that before. We can still do it.
The League, according to the former governor Ibrahim Shekarau, is non-partisan and is made up of individuals of like minds solely focused on Nigeria's unity, progress and development.
All right, there you go. Former president giving his perspective on the matter. We're joined this morning by Prince Wale Adebayo, who was the presidential candidate for SDP in the last presidential elections. Good morning and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
So, get us your, let's hear you on this, the narrative from the former president. Again, he's raised the leadership question, regionalism, much as many people they had fond memories of what transpired at the time, but listening to him now, what do you think of it?
Well, every contribution to public discourse must be put in the context of why the discussion was made, why the comment was contributed. From what I gathered, it was at a courtesy visit by the League of Northern Democrats. And by that name suggests that it is a league of Northerners who have democratic aspirations for the country. And in that context, I wouldn't take it to be a speech on regionalism generally, because regionalism will mean different things. I think what the former president was trying to drive at is that any discourse about a common problem in Nigeria should not exclude anyone. It should be made available for everyone who wants to contribute. From the chairman, former Governor Shekarau, to the convener, Dr. Umar Ado, and many of my brothers who are there, Aminu Shagari, Mutala Yaradua, and many people. These are my friends, and these are my supporters, these are my believers, and these are people I consider to be Democrats. And if they form an organization that is just in a League of Northern Democrats, what President Obasanjo is saying that some people, it is that Northern they will see. They will not see the League, and they will not see the Democrats in it. But if you're able to see all the three words, you will understand that these are Nigerians of Northern extraction who are concerned about our democracy. And there's nothing unusual about that. But for a president like President Obasanjo, who joined the Nigerian Army, not Northern Army, not the Western Army, who ruled as Nigerian head of state and Nigerian president, and joined a national party called the PDP, when you come to him from anything that is sectional, that is regional, that is not all-inclusive, he will balk at it. So that is his own background. But discussion about regionalism as a system of government, as a method of administration, that's a different discussion. That is political science discussion. That is discussion of history. It doesn't mean that the regions were not good. The regions were great. But in modern times, when you are discussing national issues, you need to discuss it on a national basis. But what I believe is that many things that are national today started as regional. Even the Federal Road Safety Corps started as Oyo State Road Safety Corps. It's now a National Road Safety Corps. So many things can start from the region, can start from anywhere, as long as it is for national benefits. I believe we should listen and we should try to expand.
We might as well get your perspective then on your impression about regional system of government as it affects the national governance in whole? Because, I mean, you vowed to lead this country. So what's your perspective on that part?
My perspective is that problems that are regional and local should be addressed locally. You cannot federalize every issue. But Nigeria is a reasonably sized country, and it's just the right size to be one polity, one entity, and I believe in that one entity. However, many things were done better in the region, not just because they were regional, but because the nature of the problems were localized to those regions, and also because the region was very effective. Some of it has to do with the effectiveness of British administration generally. They were good with the civil services and public services. But I don't think that we can rule out regionalizing certain aspects of things. In fact, just like Maupe spoke earlier in the program today, when discussing the collapse of national grid, maybe if we had regional grids, we had grids at local levels, state levels, and I made that speech during my campaign 2 years ago with respect to how to manage power, how to decentralize the national grid, and make the national electricity grid to be a backup, so that if there is a collapse in one section of the country, you could will power to them for the time being. But the idea that you assume that if something is called federal or national, automatically works better or automatically unites people. No. In fact, it will surprise many people that in the regions in the past, it didn't matter if you came from those regions. There were people from the east and west who were senior in government services in northern Nigeria. So none of these things guarantees success, and none of it guarantees failure. I think efficiencies matter, but regionalism will be used on many occasions because of geography, because of the localization of the issues, and things like that. So this...
Let me put this way. Considering where we are today, with many asking questions about whether or not our federal system is really working in the real sense of the word. If 7 presidents were to come up with probably a bill or something to say, look, let's see how we can strengthen the regions and get the typology of what we had in the past, and where you had institutions that developed and things and the positives that were at the time. What would your response be if you see that?
My response will be nuanced. I would engage on 3 basic principles. That one, the regions worked, not just because they were regions, but because the people who ran them were interested in running proper government. And even if you don't change anything today in terms of regionalization, if you keep the structure and the constitutional framework that we have now, if you have patriots and highly knowledgeable people to run things will run well. So don't say those regions ran because they were regions. They ran because of the quality of the political leadership, the quality of the public services, and the general direction and the moral compass of the country at that time, and the leftover of the efficiencies for which the British were known in public services. You may disagree with them over colonialism or anything, but as efficient public servants, you don't get them as you get the British. Now, what I would say in addition is that those who are running the country today, as at present, if they were asked to run the regions, they will have ruined the regions. If they are displaying the same attitude today now, if they display them when the regions were there, they will ruin the regions. So it is not the form of government that is the problem of the country, but the quality of leadership that is running these governmental institutions and framework. Second thing is that you do not regionalize, you don't overcorrect. Don't go and eliminate everything uniting the country and regionalize. For example, you cannot regionalize the armed forces. You cannot regionalize postal services. You cannot regionalize diplomacy. You cannot regionalize trade. You cannot regionalize currency. So there are many things you cannot regionalize. However, any other thing, you could regionalize them, and you can even localize them. For example, the police. If a goat belonging to Mr. Nwosu is missing in Owerri, this is not the business of the IG in Abuja. to have a say in it. But he does have a say in it because if the person who stole the goat is the son of a senator, the senator is going to call the IG, and the IG is going to arrest the owner of the goat, free the thief. So you don't need all of that. So you need to localize issues. Public education, you need to localize public education. People should be able to develop an educational system that is very conducive to them. Mathematics will always remain mathematics, but you want people to run their local schools. You want to let states to be able to run their roads. There should be no federal roads. Essentially, you should be able to just have roads. And once trade is federalized, any road you use is okay. Efficiency, management of the roads is important. We should allow states to generate revenue and as much as possible to support local industry, to support local ability to run fiscal management, and local government should not be federalized. States should be allowed to create as many local governments as is conducive to them. So those are the things I believe in that you should do. And if we understand that, then the third thing is that no matter what system of government you create, whether it's regional, whether it's local, every Nigerian should have access to it. Anybody from old Western region or Eastern region or Midwest when it was created, 1963, could go to the North and get a job. Because Sir Ahmadu Bello Sardauna, who was leading the government, and those who are supporting him, like Makama Bida and many people, they were not racist, they were not racial, they were not ethnicist. They saw that the region belonged to everybody who was physically in the North. It didn't matter where you came from before. So you could become a judge of the High Court of Northern Nigeria, even though you're not Hausa, Fulani, Tiv, any of those ethnicities indigenous to the North. You could come from anywhere. And that is the approach. Awolowo was giving free education to anyone who was in the Western region. He did not ask where you were born and all of that. And I think that is the attitude. And if you went to Port Harcourt, in those days when Okpara was Premier of the East, nobody knew who was from anywhere. So many people from many parts of the country, if you live in Port Harcourt and you are the Garden City person or boy or girl, you went to school. So these are the three principles that I would want us to understand. One, that regionalization or form of government is not be it all and end all. Secondly, that efficiencies are better, some at local level, some at the federal level. And thirdly, a Nigerian should be able to enjoy equal rights under all these forms of government, whether local, regional, or federal.
You know, your pragmatism is very on point. That's what some people will say. At least that's how I say it. But, you know, the statement that strikes me the most is your very nuanced response to, you know, whether regionalism, because as a result of how the regions works, a lot of people really do long for the regions. They long for those days when, you know, competition was at the heart of it. But it seems you are arguing that it wasn't just the regions. The regions didn't work because they were regions, but because of the quality of people. And some people will argue that as a result of government being everybody's own and nobody's own, is one of the reasons why we're where we are. And that maybe perhaps that dropped the standard for the people who, you know, came into the federal government, who did not see the need, who did not see or could not take ownership of the federal government. Because as far as they were concerned, it was federal. It was for everybody and it was for nobody. Do you think that had anything? Because some people will say, oh, we saw the regions, people took ownership, they saw it as theirs, and so they were able to take ownership, and maybe that also reflected on the quality of people that were there. Would you accept that argument?
I will respectfully disagree for three reasons. One, people steal local government money nowadays. They even steal town union money nowadays. They steal money belonging to temple, churches, and mosques. So it's the general moral decay. Because if you look at those who were at the federal level in those days, they came from the regions, but they were very loyal to the federal government. It didn't matter where they came from. They were highly loyal and they did their job effectively. The problem now is that if you go to the EFCC records, they steal state money more than even federal money. You're more likely to have a governor finish from his office and report himself at EFCC or be looked for by EFCC. So if you think that only the federal government people don't have a sense of belonging to, why would somebody who was born poor, who was raised by the public, who was a child of nobody, and turned out to be a governor, and still everywhere dry, even though the state capital is his hometown, or just 1 hour from his hometown? So these people who are doing all of this thing called governance, they don't know anything about governance. Even if they wanted to do what's right, they don't know what is right. We need to have a new philosophy about our government. And if you notice, you can do a survey from your media house and do a survey around the government. The number of people in the public service, whether elected, appointed, or career, who understand the 3 pillars of modern governance, which the British call PPE: philosophy, political science, and economy. They are less than 1% of 1%. And the people we elect nowadays are not politicians. They are financiers who believe that politics is like investing money in any other venture. So when you invest money, you will reap in abundance. So many people who ordinarily would be in business will realize that if you invest in banking, agriculture, or whatever, you get a single-digit return. But if you invest in politics, you get millionfold. If you give £1 billion to support a political party or a candidate, you could have a whole ministry given to you. And that is what is dominating the issue. And ministers, commissioners, and other senior government people are recruited to help the boss get his money back, to protect procurement and other business opportunities for their clan, for their clique. So no pure government is going on. We need to reintroduce ourselves to governance. The reason why our politics is failing is that our philosophy of governance has failed. So even though Karl Marx says the philosophers have interpreted the world, what is left is to change it. In the case of Nigeria, the philosophers have to come back and reinterpret public governance to us first. So we need to agree, because you will see a lawmaker, he doesn't care about lawmaking, and is not evaluated for lawmaking. He's evaluated for bringing goodies back home, motorcycle, giving money to people. I saw a video recently, somebody saying that the lawmaker representing them in Kwara South was to give them laptops, but he took photos with them and never gave them the laptop. Both of them are wrong. The senator is wrong. It's not your business to give anybody laptops. Your job is to make laws. We should make it easier for everybody to have laptops. Secondly, the citizen who believes that the senator owes him a laptop, well, it's the salary of the senator to give a laptop to every youth in the constituency. So these are the problems that you see. So what we have here, I'm careful because your medium is not my medium, and I don't want to say my entire mind without giving respect to your editorial ethics. But what we are running is essentially a quasi-criminal organization we call government, because we go there to violate our own laws. We go there to organize together and do things which, if you did them in your private capacity, you will spend a long time in prison. That's what we do in government. So that is why the system is not working. So whether you break the region and become 12 states, then you go 19 states, then 21 states, 30 states, 35 states, you have 775 local government, you have crime going on all over the place because there's no governance. And when you bring young people into government, they are grateful. The first thing a minister does when he's appointed by a president is to go and lie flat and say, thank you, daddy, because he thinks it's a gift. He doesn't know that the person who appointed you is in trouble because he's taking a public mandate, which he cannot handle by himself all alone. So he's bringing you to come and help him. You're supposed to be his first critic, his first sparring partner, the devil's advocate. You're the one to give the counterpoint so that you can have a robust cabinet. Look at the ministers. They are all scattered all over the place. If you stop President Tinubu today and say, give me the addresses, home addresses of your ministers, he doesn't know that. Doesn't know where his Minister of Finance lives, doesn't know where Attorney General lives. They all scattered it because President Obasanjo and some people advised him, including Erufai, They sold up all the government houses. So ministers don't live close to each other. They are far from the state house. So the government is disarticulated. So when a minister leaves his office to go to consult with the president, the whole day is wasted. Whereas in those days, in the colonial system, in the First Republic system, the Minister of Finance would live next door to the Prime Minister. Then after that, the Attorney General, a Foreign Affairs Minister, Minister for the Interior, and all of them live together there. They can just walk over in the evening and have a talk about government. And everybody lives and works. When there is cabinet meeting, almost every minister walks up to the cabinet room. They scatter all of that, shows to you that they are not even organized properly to be a government. They are all isolated in silos all over the place. So that is what we need to reorganize before we can now start to talk about form of government. Run the one you have now effectively. When you run it effectively, then you can now start to see where the effective running has some glitches. You can make amendments. We can always amend the legislative list and next to the Constitution. They are not written, they are not laws of Moses. They are not cast in stone. They are to be implemented, and we can always amend them. But the key thing worrying us is that even today, one of the challenges I had when I was running for office, and I called my people, that in the SDP, my political party, if I was elected president, I told them, we don't even have enough quality people to constitute the entire government. We have to go back outside our party and get people. We have to go everywhere in the country and get people to come and run government, because the idea of running government, the business of self-governance, getting sovereignty for yourself, is not a joke.
Let me quickly ask you, so because the starting point of this conversation was the establishment of that League of Northern Democrats, and you have made very interesting arguments as to, what President Obasanjo said, and the fact that, for a number of people, the first thing I would stick out is Northern, instead of the entire three words that make up the name of the group. So I'm wondering, for you, what do you think that groups like that can accomplish? Do you think that with names like that, knowing how, divided we are right now, do you think that names like that will be able to make much impact, in a country so divided?
Yeah, I think so. Let me tell you why I say so, because even though it's called League of Northern Democrats, there's nobody there who's not a pan-Nigerian. Anybody who wants to contest patriotism with Umarado won't go far. And Shekarau is a great man, a governor of Kano, but he's a patriot of the highest order. So I know many people there, Aminu Shagari, Mutalaya, Yaradu, and many other people that I know there. I don't want to spend all your time mentioning names. And when they were discussing the formation of the group, they spoke to people who are outside the North. I remember Dr. Ado briefing me extensively, send me the material and all of that. So their own interpretation, what I can summarize for them is that they thought that with the outsized role that the North plays in politics, and if you look at election results, 19 states out of 36, the North is very significant. 2, the vast majority of younger people are in the North because of birth rate differential. Thirdly, if you look at the current crisis that we are facing, almost every problem has its headquarters in the North. Insecurity, hunger, economic dislocation, and things like that, and even climate change. So they thought that they could get Nigeria right if they got the Northern mindset right. Because if every political inclination from the North is democratic and wants to get good governance, then politicians who need votes from the North will follow that. They will be serious about it. But they are immediately making contact with people all across the country.
If you can hear me, sir, perhaps the challenge there is the focus on the politics. Because as you kept talking, I'm looking at the certain pillars in this whole regionalism idea. In the First Republic, as I think Malpa mentioned much earlier, while we were looking at the Makpo Hill and Makpo Hall in Ibadan during the skyline, she talked about the fact that that political arrangement was so focused that the Western region of the time used the resources to achieve a lot of firsts. First TV station in Africa, the tallest building in West Africa until 1979 and all of that. So I'm just wondering, perhaps the focus on politics or political regionalism is the problem. What about the focus on economic regionalism? Our focus on the social benefits to the people, economic benefits to the people, because everyone is wondering, because back then, even though the focus was on politics, the economic benefits, the economic competitiveness, healthy competition among the regions was one of the things that played out significantly. Maybe one of the issues that the former president Obasanjo has is that the focus on politics is not bringing economic benefits to the people. It's not building social development to the people. What's your take on that?
My take on that is that if you look at First Republic and all the achievements, fantastic. But why do you ignore the achievement of the Second Republic as well? Look at the educational transformation by people like Aparaku of Old Benue State. Look at the development that happened in Kano with taking care of the poor under the PROP government of Abubakar Rimi. Then look at the educational, the so-called low-boss state, Lagos, Ondo, Oyo, Ogun, Bende. And these states, look at what Ambrose Ali was able to do within 4 years. Look at Lagos State under Jakande. I don't think anybody has matched that record since. And if you look at people like Method Okilo and all the achievements that they had, so people, leadership, even when Muda came with this short period that he was there, when he replaced Ambrose Ali, he did quite well. So better insurance, many of these things that you had at that time came from the Second Republic. So each one had their own bank, they had their insurance company. The metro we are building in Lagos now was Jakande's brainchild, and was doing advancing it. He paid the deposit, and it was ongoing. So it is not just in the region that we did well. We did better in the Second Republic. So, and I am not a lover of military rule, but I think one of the most progressive government we've ever had in this country was that of Gawan, who set up a very strong team, and they were able to modernize the country. The Lagos you see today, from Ijora's Causeway and all of that, was all the work of Femi Okuno under General Gawan, whom I wish a happy 90th birthday. So what I'm saying generally is that you can do well in any form of government. And the problem is the quality. Secondly, to respond to your question, you cannot say there's too much focus on politics, because politics is the enemy of economics. Ashebe was right and remains right that leadership is the problem of Nigeria. So there's no economic theory, there's no economic concept that you bring forward that will not be ruined by the political economy of it. And politics is where we choose our leaders from. We don't shoot guns anymore and just grab a radio station. So we go and campaign, we sell ideas, we organize political parties. So you must get your politics right. Politics is the gateway to leadership. Many people you find today in power are a product of bad politics. And that's why I agree with Mrs. Remi Tinubu, our First Lady, when he said her husband is not the problem of the country. And I agree that the husband is just a symptom of the problem of the country, because the husband or the president we have today is a product of our politics. Okay, and the politics is faulty. So
as you know,
we need to address.
Yeah, as you know, there are several issues that are tied around our politics. And you have talked about, Chairman also mentioned it the other time, you talked about the fact that our problem is the leadership and all of that. And Chamberlain raised an issue with you about the leadership recruitment process. Now, we have state governors. Now, with the Supreme Court judgment, everyone is looking to get a local government chairman that can do one thing or the other and benefit the lives of the people. What do you need tweaking? What do you think need tweaking in our leadership recruitment process? There are those who have questioned, okay, people get into an organization like Nigeria, they get into an office, there are those who even believe that people who come into government, they don't even know what their job description is. They just get into office as governor, get into office as senator, get into office as whatever, and they just keep going the way they so. What do you think is wrong with our leadership recruitment process, and perhaps even the job descriptions for those who get into office?
There are 4 problems that I can identify, others will identify more. One is that those who are in government essentially don't want better people to come. So you will see the struggles that they have. So presidents want to look for the weakest member of his team to succeed him. The same thing with governors. That's why you have all this godfather problem all the time. So that's a major problem. So people generally, if you get our leaders, they will meet, they will fly across the country and hold meetings day and night. At the end of the day, when they want to come up with somebody to support, you will say, what? Why are you doing all this meeting? If this is what you're going to come up with anyway. Second, the problem we have is that we don't understand the philosophy of governance. Even those who are not in government, who are on the street, when they are interrogating government, they are asking the government to do what is not government duty, and they don't know what the government duty is. So we need to re-educate ourselves. It's not an insult to say that we are quite ignorant about the essence of government and what government is supposed to do. Thirdly, the education has to take place in the political parties, because our constitution says that you cannot vie for any office without a political party. And the political parties have been so constricted and run in a particular way that it is meant to filter out the good people, because the criteria automatically will throw you off balance. So, because right from membership, from picking the forms and funding political parties, so there are many things we need to do. Lastly, a government is supposed to be a microcosm of a society. It is called a representative government for a reason. The people who get elected have to resemble the people who elect them. And the general rise in criminality, lack of ethics, and general bad behavior in society, it means that if you are making a cupcake out of rice, it's going to be made of rice. If so, the pyramid is sand arranged in a funny shape. So you have to understand that from the people, their leaders emerge. And look at the people whom you criticize in politics. Look at them in their private life. They've always been that flawed. So it isn't that they were good people, they just suddenly got flawed. So in a society, so we have to just do a sociological analysis of it. So, but other societies have come around. What do? If they have a general moral decay, the few people there will go and find those who are the least flawed among them and put them in leadership and use them as example. But in our case, we end up just selecting the worst of the worst and putting them to reinforce the fact that doing wrong is power show. And you could see the struggle that even the United States is facing now, that they are going through a moral contortion in this their election, because it is now who they want to be versus who they really are at this point. So this is the struggle for every generation. And let me make a note of warning. There's no time in the history of our country, Nigeria, that we are going to not be answering this question. Because even in the First Republic, that we're looking back with some nostalgia now, they were having the same problem. But it wasn't large. So they had that problem. Everything. Remember the speech made on January 15, 1966.
I think one of the things...
People collected 10% and all of that.
I think at the end of the day, my apologies, Mr. Aday, I think at the heart of every point that you have made is the need for us to tinker with a lot of things. And that's, greatly appreciated. The question then is, how will the process start? That's another conversation for another day, but we have to thank you so much for your time this morning. W Aday, your presidential candidate of the SDP. Truly appreciate your time today.
Thank you. And God bless Nigeria.
Amen. So now we talk business, strictly business, with Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. Eladi.
Yeah, thank you, Ayo. And yes, God bless Nigeria. Hello and welcome. It's the midweek trading session right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Let's get you the top stories that set your agenda. It's a packed show. Well, let's start with our biggest Foreign currency earner, that's oil now. We see the prices are down again, 0.7%. $75.54 a barrel. That's for Brent. Grades a big drop this morning. WTI crude, $71.24, but still holding above that $70 psychological level. Industry data showed U.S. crude inventories swelled more than expected, though declines were capped as the market watched diplomatic efforts in the Middle East after Israel continued attacks on Gaza and Lebanon. So we see it's geopolitics and demand expectations moving prices right there in the oil market. Let's get a check on the FX market now. We see the Naira depreciated by about 10 kobo to fix at 1,643 Naira to the dollar. That's during trade at NAFEM. Market participants sought U.S. dollars to meet their various obligations, leading to a high demand for the greenback. So we're seeing for NFEM, 3.02% down. And NAFEX window wasn't left out. Marginal decline of 0.01%. So it's the same story at this point. Volatility right there in the FX market, just like we have in the oil market. All right, to the annual meetings now. The International Monetary Fund has reduced its 2024 growth forecast for sub-Saharan Africa to 3.6%, down from 3.7% in July. However, there was a slight increase in its forecast for Nigeria's economic growth in 2025 to 3.2%, up from 3.0% in July reports. The figures which were shared at the World Economic Outlook was part of the meetings for the second day of the World Bank IMF annual meetings. Our business correspondent, Inijon Mekwa, reports.
The second day of the annual meetings of the IMF and World Bank at Washington, D.C. has been a really busy one. But the good thing is it started on a very good note as IMF forecasts that inflation, global inflation, may have peaked already, and so deceleration should be the trend. Now, there are also other conversations that concern sub-Saharan Africa and the G24. The reforms going on in the Bretton Woods institutions also made the topic for the day. The projection of the IMF shared at the World Economic Outlook is based on receding inflation numbers and brings it closer to central bank target, with growth projected to hold steady at 3.2% in 2024. The second day of the annual meetings of the IMF and World Bank at Washington, D.C. has been a really busy one. But the good thing is it started on a very good note as IMF forecasts that inflation, global inflation, may have peaked already, and so deceleration should be the trend. Now, there are also other conversations that concern sub-Saharan Africa and the G20.
All right, I apologize for that, for distortions there. We had some technical issues with that report, but we'll definitely bring it back for you another time. But we see trade relations between Nigeria and the United States is now worth about $10 billion per year. And that's according to the U.S. Consul General in Nigeria, Mr. Will Stevens. He made this known in a workshop in Lagos, focused on the African Growth and Opportunity Act, that's AGOA, and Proper Africa. The Consul General emphasized that his country is committed to this partnership through Prosper Africa, which brings together various U.S. government agencies to boost trade between Africa and the world's biggest economy.
We're hosting an incredible conference with our partners from Prosper Africa, the U.S. Trade Representative, and USAID on helping Nigerian exporters, small and medium enterprises, export under AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunities Act. AGOA is a unilateral trade concession that the United States gives to over 45 African nations to export their goods, over 6,800 types of goods, to the United States duty-free. So any of those products can come into the U.S. duty-free. And what we want to see is Nigeria diversify their exports under AGOA. The United States and Nigeria have a very kind of equal, balanced trade relationship. It's almost $10 billion a year, about $5 billion from the United States to Nigeria and $5 billion from Nigeria to the United States. But $3.8 billion of that is under AGOA is oil-related products, and we want to see more.
All right, to our first conversation now. See, Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, presents a lucrative opportunity for investors in the tea market. With a growing population, increasing demand for specialty teas, and a thriving middle class, the Nigerian tea market is ripe for expansion. But despite being a significant consumer of tea, Nigeria relies heavily on imports, creating a gap for local production and processing. Well, let's explore opportunities, challenges, and potential returns on investments in Nigeria's tea market. Joining me for this conversation, we have Dr. Teju Bolujoko, the chairman, Master Tea, joining me right here in the studio. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so looking at what Sir Will Stevens said there, definitely Nigeria trades with America, but we're not taking full advantage of that, AGOA trade pact, because at the end of the day, it's more of oil that keeps flowing, through that trade pact. But other commodities, that we're blessed with are not, getting the attention when it comes to export. So talk to me about where we are, right now in AGOA, and what you think we should be doing right now to take full advantage of that trade pact.
Well, thank you very much for having me. AGOA is an opportunity for Nigeria, which Nigeria has not actually used. If we have been talking about tea, Nigeria produces about 1,600 tons of tea, compared with Kenya that produces about 440.
That's massive, 443,000
yes.
tons.
There is no reason why Nigeria cannot produce as much as Kenya does, because we have the facility, we have the land, we have the air, we have the sun, we have the water, we have everything. But the real challenge actually is for that if you look at Nigerian tea, if you look at Mambila, you find out that the tea in Mambila is very low in caffeine, just like our tea. In Master Tea, it's very low in caffeine, because that is the way in which the cultivars were chosen. And we have the best tea in the world, but we are not taking advantage of that.
Because I'm wondering, last time I was in Kenya, when I got back from Kenya, the first thing I was asked is, did you bring me Kenyan tea? And I'm like, what is Kenya doing that we're not doing? What comparative advantage do they have, over us in production of tea? We also see the likes of Malawi, 31,000 tons. That's what they exported. Zimbabwe exporting about 11,000. We're just working with production about 1,600 tons. Yes. So what can we do, at this time to actually tap into this market?
We need to look at the policies. Policies drives business. Government does not have business in doing business, but they have to have the policies that will drive business. The policies, if you look at, for example, the issue of logistics, you have spoken about AGOA. If you are sending product from Nigeria, it's about 4 times the cost of sending the same product from Kenya, from Ghana, our neighbor here. And these costs are inherent costs that we are going to the same market. We are selling in the same market. And as such, it is very important for interactions of policies of government with SMEs and the cost of things to be looked into again to ensure that Nigeria is comparable with other countries. I mentioned also the fact that we have as a company, we were in quite a number of exhibitions in Europe, and there are Kenya teas that are on the same exhibition with us. They're all certified. They have all the certifications that Europe wants. And if we in Nigeria are going to be certified like that, the cost of it is so high. And we were asking our neighbors, why is it, how do you get this certification? Oh, they say that certification is the least of the things we probably will have, because government has put in place a system that enables certification to take place at a low cost. And these are all the things that we need to look into. Another thing that is very important for SMEs is the issue of background checks. If you go to Europe, somebody that has messed up in one company, going to another company, they will say, okay, if you want to even rent a house, they say, where's your permit? You go and check from government how he has behaved in the last place where he worked. And these are all things that are very important if we are going to rise up to the challenges that we have. I want to say another thing. Another thing is the fact that we have been talking about Africa Trade Union. In South Africa, and this played to us, the shops were told that, look, you have to have about 70% or 75% of products made in South Africa. Hotels were told. But here in Nigeria, we have an open policy that does not allow for SMEs to thrive.
So is it time for us to start exploring protectionism at this point? Full on?
Full on, yes. There is no country in the world that does not protect its own people, its own businesses. If you look at the trade relations between America and China, it's all about what exactly how do I protect my own? And we ought to be looking at how the SME can be protected, because we have the challenges that we have. We have the issues that we have. But then if government says, well, we know we have signed this and we are just leaving you to the world, it doesn't really help.
Right, and we're at a time where we're also trying to battle sky-high inflation, and we've seen the central bank having to raise rates multiple times. We've seen rates get higher than 20%, at this point. And definitely, if you're going for the real rates, you're talking over 30%, when you go to the banks. So talk to me about cost of credit. What's your experience when it comes to getting credit, to fund your business?
Well, actually, we are an SME. There is no way, current rate from the Central Bank is 27.25. By the time it gets to the local banks, it goes higher. We don't do a business that can be able to pay.
So I'm sure you're not even looking to the banks.
No, we are not. We are not. We can't. Because we don't do a business that will pay us 40% and all that. That's not the sort of business we are in. And as such, if you cannot have that sort of returns, then you don't go to the banks. And then the other issue is the fact that who are the people that are getting this money at 35% interest rates? If I'm exporting, if I'm importing, I bring it in, I sell it immediately, and within a short time, I have the money to pay back. And so that is what our banks are doing. Our banks are not looking at SMEs. They are not supporting SMEs the way they should support. If they want to support SMEs, how will they support it? Are they going to come to the SME and say, well, we are going to give you at a very, very low rate? No, because they get their money, the way they get their money, they have to, the way they...
And it's quite interesting, when you look at the results from most of the banks, we're seeing bumper results at this point coming from, Nigerian banks, and no pun intended, really, but I'm sure there's some, entrepreneurs, watching right now, some investors on the sideline. I'm trying to imagine what opportunities lie in this tea market, at this point. What would you say are those interesting points some investors can pile money into in this market?
I would say that production is one area that we must invite investors and have policies that will help investors to be able to promote. If we are not encouraging local investors, there is no way external investors will come. Local investors must be encouraged. Our farmers must be encouraged. The people that want to have the resources to be able to invest must be encouraged. Encouraged in the sense that we have spoken about logistics, and there must be a relationship that we are understanding between, take for example, the cost of diesel and fuel and the cost of transport and the cost of production and the cost of materials. There is a connection, and we must always look at whatever government policies we have, how are they affecting this area of development. We need to, agriculture is one thing that indeed we need to put a lot of emphasis and effort on. But the question is, what are the issues today with agriculture, large-scale agriculture? We have the issue of security and all that and all that. So those are all issues that government must sit down and see how they interlink and relate with all the areas that we want. We want investors to come in, let the local investors be happy. Then investors will come in.
So make local investors happy before you go out there and get the foreign investors to party more. Thank you so much. It was great having you, Dr. Teju Bolujoko, is the chairman, Master T. Thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, another interesting conversation. How are your bank apps working? We'll find out in a moment. Just stay with us. The Nigerian banking industry is undergoing a critical technological overhaul, with leading banks replacing their legacy core banking systems. Customers have complained about service disruptions for a couple of weeks now, but will services be restored fully soon? Join us for this conversation. We have Mr. Adedeji Olowo as the founder, Lend Square, joining me via Zoom. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, Yadi. Good to see you again.
It's great to see you. It's great to see you too. It's been quite a while. But I know you know what's happening, with most of these banks right now in Nigeria, undergoing they took this decision to switch their core banking applications, and most of them are doing it at the same time. Are we safe? Why are they making this move all at the same time?
Thanks so much for that question, Laddie. So here's the thing, banks are like what? Most of the banks we have today, many of them used to call them new generation bank like about 10, 20 years ago. All of them have been growing almost at the same pace. So you will see that those changes in terms of upgrade to core banking tend to happen almost around the same time. And why are they seeing that? You can see the central bank has seen them to increase their capital base. Banks are getting bigger. With this new capital being raised, and with the way the world is evolving, right, with the rise of digital technology, you can see that everybody is preparing for the future growth. And the best time to do it maybe yesterday, maybe the next best time is to do it is now. So if you've got to raise $500 billion, you can't start telling people in a couple of years' time that you are not able to process millions of transactions a day. So I will expect that this will be the best time they can do it based on the realities as the world is evolving.
What would you say are those, technical challenges, associated with switching, core banking applications? And do you think the banks are doing enough to, address most of these challenges?
Okay, so people have asked me this question before, and I used to tell people, like, look, there are two ways to look at this thing. There is core banking upgrade, which is when you improve what you currently have, and then there's a core banking switch. Now, a core banking upgrade is, in the simplest system, is doing a surgery, right? This is very disruptive because you have to practically stop everything you're doing to make sure what you have is now better than before. Now, even though it might be the same thing, usually there's a lot of things that you have to change to meet new realities. Now, core banking change itself, that is like total transplant. You are changing everything completely. So could there have been other ways to do it? Yes, I feel like we could do some things better, but to be very frank, it's just like if somebody goes to the hospital to do a transplant, a change, they might get back to work in some time, but it can't be the next day. So there is always going to be challenges. Now, but where I feel that banks could have done this better is to actually be very open to their customers, what they're trying to do, and what kind of impact it will have. I think this is where most of the banks are failed.
And it's quite interesting, Nigerians are still recovering, from the Naira redesign policy, and when people could not really access cash, and we now had to rely, we couldn't even access the apps, at some point, we now had to rely on the fintechs. So talk to me about the fintechs. Do they also have to do some kind of upgrade, at some point, or are they fine?
Well, that is going to be high for them in the future. When you look at a typical bank today compared to a fintech, banks are significantly way bigger, apart from few fintechs that process things at very large scale. That's number one. But then fintechs may also have a few bit of advantage over banks because the structure and manner of their technology is a little bit different. So usually most banks use monolithic, we call them monolithic application. These are very big applications that run on mainframes that are very expensive. You can only do major changes to them. But for fintechs, they run on simpler technology. Well, it's simpler because it looks simple, but it's simpler because it's also better, right? We call them things like microservices that allow you to have sometimes what we call horizontal scaling. It means that as you have more transactions coming to you, you could just spread your services this way. Unlike banks that have to spread their services in a vertical manner. Now, spreading in a vertical manner is usually more expensive and destructive, but for horizontal scaling, it's a whole lot easier. But nevertheless, when the current crop of fintechs we have in Nigeria also grow to that kind of scale, they will definitely always have to do some upgrade as well, and it may impact people. Now, if I may add, if you're a big bank, if something is happening to your system, it gets to impact more people because you have more customers who may not be able to receive money sent to them or who may not be able to easily send money. But if you're a smaller bank or a smaller fintech, even when you have protracted challenges, a lot of people may not know because most people don't use you. So if you look at Nigeria today and you look at it like Pareto's rule, you can say that the top 5 banks control like almost 60-70% of banking industry. So it means that if anything is happening to them, the impact on the entire Nigeria in itself and the kind of noise and complaint that come up will be significantly more.
Right, and we did hear the EFCC chairman, I think that was yesterday, talk about potential losses due to cyber insecurity. With this whole process, this whole switching and upgrade process, are there potential cybersecurity risks that consumers or customers should actually be aware of and maybe protect themselves from with this process?
Absolutely. So, when you look at in the issue of cybersecurity, social engineering is a bigger risk from that whole cybersecurity suite of risk. Why? Because, take for example, a bank is doing an upgrade or a bank has an issue, people are sending money to customers, it's not impacting on time. Fraudsters who send SMS and email to people and say, oh, you send money to somebody, he hasn't gotten there, click this link to register your issue. And that would be a problem. Now, what could banks do to do this? It's a communication. Banks need to be open, banks need to respect their customers, banks need to be very clear on what the issues are and when they're coming back, right? If this is well done, it will happen. Now, during this time of upgrade, I've seen different banks handle this thing differently. Some banks, right, because I get to have accounts in almost every bank based on the kind of work I do. Some banks were communicating clearly, okay, we are doing this, we are back, we are yet to come back. Some banks just kept mum and you have no idea about what's happening. Now, when a bank doesn't speak to their customers, it's easy for bad actors to start speaking to their customers on their behalf.
Yeah, definitely. Cybersecurity, a big issue. I'm tired of, most of these hackers always trying to take over my WhatsApp at some point. They always keep trying. It's so frustrating. But are there any international benchmarks or standards that, Nigerian banks are adhering to, during this whole transition?
Interestingly, when you go globally, right, a lot of banks have done upgrade without issues. Some banks have also done upgrade that have caused a lot of issues, especially some of the British banks, like TSB Lloyds. For us, I feel like Nigerian banks should elevate themselves to a level where even if others have not done it well internationally, we should be the example. So we should elevate ourselves to a level where when people go to Harvard, they talk about the upgrade done by a Nigerian bank, why that should be a masterclass in the upgrade. I think that kind of thinking is what should be permeate our thoughts, our mind in the Nigerian banking ecosystem.
All right, so, going into 2025, what are you seeing? Do you see better customer experience for, most of these customers, or are we seeing more upgrades into 2025?
For the banks that haven't done upgrades right now, it's still going to come to them. Because once you raise money, literally you have to do an upgrade. Why? Because you have to justify that money you raised, which means that you have to have better technology to be able to handle larger number of customers. But one thing we have to do is we have to separate the concept of customer service from technology. Technology is an enabler to allow you to serve your customer better. But if you don't respect your customers to start with, and if you do not care about how your customers think when you have issues, even if you have the best technology in the world, it's not going to help. Now, if you have basic technology, but you care about your customers, then they will enjoy you even when you haven't done an upgrade. So my challenge for banks is that this upgrade may mean that some transactions could be faster. But if a bank doesn't usually respond to customers, if a bank doesn't usually send emails to customers or SMS to customers when there are issues or when they are working on anything, that upgrade is not going to send emails on their behalf. So that thinking of caring about customers, as after all, we just left this customer service week, that thinking should permeate our thoughts and let banks start winning based on quality of customer service. Because just after consolidation, like about a decade ago, to 15 years ago, a lot of banking improved. But over the last 2-3 years, maybe for the last 4 years, quality of customer service has kind of reduced significantly. You send emails to bank, you don't get answers, you have issues, it doesn't get resolved on time. So this has nothing to do with technology at all. It's got to do with, management executives have to step forward and think of their customers, respect their customers, and take care of them.
Right, because we see a lot of customers going on X, tagging some of these banks and reporting the cases there.
It's quite tiring.
It is. Thank you so much, Adedeji Lowe, founder, Lens Square. It was great having you today. Thank you.
Good to have you as well, Lani.
All righty, that's the show today. The markets are open right now. We'll give you a summary of what's happening at intraday. That's at 1 p.m. on Business Incorporated. Then we'll give you a total summary at News at 10. Thank you for watching. I'm Ladi Williams. I hand things back over to the Sunrise Daily team.
Well, as you've seen there, Muda Yusuf joins us this morning. He is the head man at CPPE. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
There's an indication this morning on the front pages of the paper. Some of the papers are talking about power supply. Let's begin from there. The Daily Trust actually was very, very explicit that millers, barbers, literally small businesses, they are crying, about the effects of massive blackout in the north, saying that power outage is grounding their businesses and that a state of emergency should be declared in the electricity sector. At the end of the day, it's the effect that is having on the economy that is germane. What's your take on that to begin with?
Well, my take is that we need to prioritize our government expenditure on energy, because energy is very, very critical for economic development. There is no economy that can progress without sufficient support in terms of energy, whether you are talking about electricity or you are talking about renewable energy, or you are even talking about fuel. So government presence in that space is extremely very, very important. Now, what we have seen in the electricity sector has been issues of, maybe over-centralization, because a whole lot of this has to do with the grid. vandalization of the grid and all of that. Something happens in Jeba, it affects the whole country. Something happens in Osogbo, it affects the whole country. So that over-centralization for a country of our size is something that we need to look at. And I think that even the current reform process around the power sector is looking at all of that. But we need to fast-track all that processes. Because these are more critical things,
But isn't that something more that, even the subnationals or states in particular should be championing, given that now they have legal provision to be able to generate electricity, transmit as they want, and all.
Well, they should be doing that. But again, it depends on what capacity they have. Because for me, I think
is it the capacity they have or capacity they need?
No, capacity they have.
Okay.
Both the capacity they have and the capacity they need. When I say capacity to have, they have, it's about financial resources. Because some of these things require some heavy lifting. And about capacity that they need, they also need capacity to effectively put the institutional structures in place to be able to manage the space and regulate it. Not many of them have that capacity. So there are issues around, managerial capacity, institutional capacity, and financial capacity. But in the meantime, I think the federal government needs to continue to play the lead role as far as some of these major reforms are concerned, as far as some of the policies that are needed to drive the reforms. We have been talking about mini grids, we have been talking about renewable energy. Imagine if the barbers and all these things that you talked about have access to solar or some of this other renewable energy at a cheaper cost.
Is that to say that all of the initiatives of the government, be it federal or state, is not yielding results? We understand, of course, you are not unaware of the Rural Electrification Agency and all of the initiatives that have been, going on in that space for quite a while.
Well, a lot has been happening, but again, we are dealing with a major gap, a major deficit in this space. So what has been happening is not making that material impact on the deficit we have in the power supply space.
It means then, just as you said, maybe because we haven't really had the difficult conversation of who should be involved in the energy sector, because if the states are playing as significantly as the federal government is playing, being that it's now a constitutional thing that for them maybe it would be easier.
It will be easier, but it will take them some time. At
least let's see some movement.
They have to do some movement.
Hopeful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And more importantly, is for government to also support this process with the appropriate fiscal policy measures. We should not have a situation where the cost of installing solar system, inverters, the battery, will be costing so much. Because if these things were cheaper, many people even walk away from this national grid thing. Don't buy your solar, get your batteries, and you move on with your life. But we need the right kind of fiscal policy in terms of the import duty that you have to pay on solar panels, on inverters, on batteries, possibly even a subsidy. That is what happens in some other parts of the world that are, pushing aggressively on this energy transition. They subsidize things that have to do with renewables, so that more people will be able to transit on their own. There's also the issue of financing. I saw 1 or 2 banks are trying to provide financing to support the transition, at micro level, supporting solar systems and so on. Let us see more of that, so that even at our micro level, people can take decisions that will make their lives, much better and easier.
How do all of these play in the position of the IMF, saying that Nigeria's growth is now a little slower? Says IMF slashes Nigeria's growth prospects over low oil production, severe flooding and others. Is this energy security or a lack of it included in the others?
Well, it is possible, but the energy issue is not something that is new. It's almost what you can regard as a constant in an equation. So I think what the IMF is saying, for me, it's not something really significant. I'm saying that because our Q1 GDP growth was about 3%. It's about 3.98, I mean 2.98 or so, which is almost 3%. Our Q2 GDP was slightly over 3%, about 3.2. So if the IMF is now projecting that this will come down to 2.9 by the end of the year, nothing really material as far as I'm concerned. And in any case, we may even make up to 3%, given the fact that we made 3% in Q1, we made 3.2 in Q2, so we don't know what the Q3 will be because of some of these challenges, but really nothing material. You know, what is more important for us now? It's not even the issue of all this GDP growth and all of that. We are more bothered about the issue of cost of living, cost of doing business, you know, how prices can come down. These are the critical issues. Because when you talk to citizens about IMF projection and all of that, for many people, it's just something that's purely academic.
Just want to get by the day.
Yes, and so what? GDP is going to move to 3%, 4%, and so what? You know? So the critical issues is what we should be bothered about. So when IMF speaks, sometimes you wonder whether they're really addressing the core issues, you know, that we are dealing with. I mean, look at our performance in Human Development Index. Look at our performance in manufacturing capacity utilization. Look at the poverty situation. Look at the very depressing data that is coming from the World Bank.
But aren't these other all part of a whole?
No. You see, the focus of IMF most of the time, IMF has the social content in their perspective is very, very minimal. They're always looking at some of this data, abstract data, GDP, and all of that. You know, they don't address so much issues that have serious, you know, bearing on businesses, on SMEs, and more importantly, on the welfare of the people.
But if
we need to be having more conversation.
But if you look
around that,
but if you look at the issue that IMF raised, one of the issues, one of the consequences, or rather one of the causes of that projection is low oil production. And you would also listen to the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy also saying that if we improve oil production, we will boost FX inflows. And how significant is that for you?
That is not news. I mean, that is. But how do you see that is what we all know.
How is it? Are you optimistic about that? That's the real question.
Well, I'm optimistic because I know that the government has been doing a lot trying to tackle the challenges that has been impeding oil output. You know, issues of oil theft. I'm also aware that the government has been doing a lot to drive investment, especially in gas. You know, because we have even bigger endowment in gas than in crude oil. You know, a lot of incentives, and I see that a lot of investors are showing a lot more interest in investing in gas. I think that is something that is significant. So if we're able to make, you know, significant progress along those fronts, of course, it will have a significant impact on the entire macroeconomic environment. Because no matter what we say, oil is still the bigger issue as far as FX is concerned today. We are talking about boosting our foreign exchange inflows. It has to start with oil, because that is perhaps the low-hanging fruit for us. If you can remove some of these impediments and all of that. So if you are able to make progress, I mean, luckily oil price is very high now, you know, so it's a big advantage for many oil-producing countries.
But then there are those who are still in that space. Maybe just one of the segments of oil production is the petrol. Recently, there is news filtering around that petrol consumption has come down because of the increase in the prices. What do you make of that? There are those who are saying that as a result of the increase in prices, bunkering has reduced, illegal exportation of our petroleum products have reduced in the country. Do you agree with them? Is there validity in that?
But as a third point, many people have also parked their cars. Those who used to buy full tank or half tank and now buy a quarter of a tank.
Some people have also said that, look, when they go abroad anyway, they don't even drive their cars. They go in public transport and all of that. But is it valid?
No, it's valid. But what I'm saying is that we need to expand the variables.
Okay.
Yes, the smuggling will reduce because the incentive to smuggle has practically been eliminated.
But is it actually significant on the number of liters that we consume in the country? Does it help to produce real figures?
Of course it helps. You see a clearer figure, when you have this kind of thing. But again, we need to disaggregate the drivers of these figures. They are the fact that even domestic consumption had dropped significantly. I mean, you can see that, in many places where you used to have a lot of traffic, there is not so much traffic anymore. You drive into the filling station now, you spend 10,000, maybe you get maybe 10 liters or even less. So you have to plan your journeys. You have to determine where to go and where not to go. So there's a lot of economics now around, the use of fuel. People are now much more conscious. They are now much more economical. So that is also a major factor. So there's a factor of the fact that even in economics, you see, once prices go up, the demand drops. This is also reflected in the demand for fuel. So we are seeing a much more realistic figure. But again, this is not also such a big positive that many people cannot put their cars on the road. Because, what alternatives do you have? It's a different thing if you are in an environment where you have very, good public transportation system, especially for the middle class. You can park your car and go. You are sure of the timing that the bus will come. You are sure that the bus will be decent, it's well maintained, and all of that. There's a train that you can go to the train station, take the train, no traffic. You are comfortable. So for me, that should be our aspiration. So that even voluntarily, people will decide to even, just as we have abroad. But we don't have that yet. So that is why I feel that we need to make it slowly, with this deregulation of a thing. I'm talking of the PMS. Because it is still very central to mobility in the country. It's very central to connectivity within the country. It's very central to even the issue of inflation that you talk about. So we need to make it slowly, and I will also caution that we don't completely deregulate, because we don't know what the trajectory will be. If, for instance, Israel now strikes Iran and all of that, and crude oil price jumps up, are we going to still remain in the cost to say that we are completely deregulated? Then PMS price will now jump to what? To 1,003, 1,004, or 1,005. How are we going to cope with that? So all these variables we need to take into account in our policy process.
It doesn't make any difference that we are technically producing in country.
Well, it does make some difference. But again, it depends on how much of crude we're able to source locally. There's a challenge, with how much can the NNPC provide for the domestic refineries. It's also, there's also an issue as to what exchange rate. Because yes, it's a good thing what the government has done, that to be selling the crude to domestic refineries in Naira. But at what exchange rate? If it is going to be at the prevailing exchange rate, that may still, have implications for the price. But of course, there's a whole lot of advantage in the fact that we are producing domestically, and as much as possible, we should have a policy process to encourage that domestic production.
Now, talking about policies, very, very quickly, I want to talk about cost of living, but very quickly, do you see a more harmonious monetary policy, fiscal policy arrangement now, which I've often spoken about before?
Well, for me, I think it's work in progress. It's work in progress. The central bank governor has said that repeatedly. There is a need for harmonization and synergy the Minister of Finance has also said that. And I think they are working collaboratively on that. But I think we need to do a lot more. Because if you look at what is happening in the foreign exchange environment and all this problem of so-called liquidity in the system, because to the average man, to the average business people, they say there is no money, and yet they say there is excess liquidity. So people don't understand what is going on. And I think what we need to worry about is that the rate at which some of these government funds infiltrate the foreign exchange market, we should have a way, a framework to deal with it.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that each time we have this FAC allocation, we feel the impact in the forex market, particularly in the BDCs. And when you have a policy framework that is committed to convergence, so every time there is pressure in the BDCs market, the CBN say, okay, the gap is widening, then they depreciate the official window. And all of us begin to suffer for it. So when you have a situation where the factors driving demand for forex are not exactly rooted in genuine economic activities, we have to worry about that. These are some of the distortions that we are grappling with in the foreign exchange market.
Do you see, because one of the issues that have also been raised around that, you know, at least trying to control some of the issues that you have raised now, is what the banks we hear were told, you know, that they upgrade to a particular software in the banking system so that government will be able to track some of these unscrupulous activities in the financial market. If that is true, do you see it as a good solution?
No, in fairness to the CBN has been trying a whole lot. Because this is an unusual economy, you know? So you need to have that kind of very robust oversight. Because people are playing all manner of tricks. But the bigger issue is, to me, of course, there are elements of all these malpractices within the banking system, which some of this software may help to capture. But there are bigger issues outside the banks.
Such as?
I mean, I'm talking about the parallel market, where people are just moving funds and all of that. You don't know what transactions is going on. People are moving, you know. We don't have enough framework to monitor what is happening in the BDCs area, in the parallel market area. And what is happening there has significant implications for monetary policy.
Don't all of these monies go through the banks?
No, not all of them. Okay, if there is a FAC allocation now from maybe to the government, and it flows from there to the BDCs, maybe in cash, because sometimes
I'm wondering, is it that they go to the FAC, that the FAC allocation is the big bags they carry, they take away from the...
I don't know how they do it, because there's a lot of creativity.
All right. Creativity.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
But I have to ask you this question before we sign off, you know, Dr. Yusuf. What are the low-hanging fruits for the Nigerian? The cost of living is killing quite a number of people, and particularly at a time like this when the banks, or some of the banks, and all of them as they're going to go through the process, are having this turbulent challenge, this turbulent transition challenge. What are the low-hanging fruits for the Nigerian?
Well, the low-hanging fruit for me will be around fiscal policy. We have enough of monetary policy efforts. I'm talking of tightening and all of that. Even though the IMF is still, you know, urging the CBN to continue to tighten. But as far as I'm concerned, we have almost reached the limit of monetary policy tightening. So the focus should shift to the use of tax policies, to the use of fiscal policies, which is what all this Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform is all about. We should reduce our tariffs, we should reduce our cost of imports, we should reduce the cost of clearing cargo at the ports, you know, and we should reduce taxes. Because you cannot be tightening the noose on all fronts.
And how long do you think all of this will take?
It doesn't take time. I mean, it doesn't take time if we get our bureaucracy to work well. We have some policies that have been announced on fiscal policy, on food importation, on pharmaceutical products. Some of them are yet to be implemented. So we need to work on the implementation machinery.
I don't even want to go into that proposal we hear is in the National Assembly now for some tax laws.
Yes.
Don't even go there yet, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
He is founder and CEO of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Markwe Chamberlain.
Oh yeah, a very interesting one, I tell you. But yeah, this is where we draw the curtains on the program today. We have to thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain. So.
Well, I'm going to end by reading the first lines from where we started. Apparently, we have a few viewers following, and they knew the poem I was referring to about John Pepper Clark. Ibadan, Russian splash of rust and gold flung and scattered among 7 hills like a broken china in the sun. That's from John Pepper Clark, that famous poem on Ibadan. Thank you so much for sending that in. And I hope you have some amala today. Thank you for watching. Amal, where will be Yusuf?
If only your husband was from Ibadan, trust me, they will return the dowry today because they just love you more. Amaya Makinde, do have a beautiful day.